Hello, everyone in Business Mastery Nation. We have a special episode today outside of our normal episodic order. We're fortunate enough to have Jorian Hoover, a VC coach from the United States and Europe who does business on both sides of the pond, just got back from Slush. From those of you who don't know, Slush is the largest VC event in the world, hosted in Europe, but global reach. And we have the opportunity to meet with somebody who just got back. Jorian, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and then roll into the event?
Yeah, and thanks so much for having me, Jerry. I just got back from Slush, which is an annual event that happens in Helsinki every November or December. And it's one of the world's largest kind of startup or VC conferences. It has about 15,000 people coming. It's been around since 2008. And all the kind of top European startups are all there. Many are vying for investment. And then worldwide investors are coming too, from the likes of Sequoia down to kind of smaller funds as well.
That is so exciting. And as far as the layout, is it structured like a traditional conference with a main talk and a bunch of breakouts, or how's it constructed?
Yeah. So while 15,000 people go to the event, there's even more that kind of fly in and don't even just go to these side events. And so the way the week is structured is on Tuesday, you have either an investor day or a founder day, depending on kind of what your ticket type is. And then Wednesday and Thursday, they have the main talks that everyone kind of joins for. And while those talks are going on, there's also tons of booths with startups and different companies. But then outside of all that is where a lot of side events happen. And that's where some of the magic occurs as well.
As a longtime speaker in conference attendee, I would imagine that that the majority of the big deals and happenings occur in the after parties around the actual events. Was that your experience?
I think so. I wasn't privy to any of the big deals. I went to some of those side events. This was my first year going. Next year will be my second. I hope to go to some more. But yeah, sometimes those side events can be a little bit more of an intimate setting, where you can be more deliberate with who you're kind of meeting, some of the investors there or founders there, and have a little bit more time for authentic kind of conversation and striking deals.
Now, your background is in finance and coaching startups to prepare for funding. So I can imagine you must have learned a lot. What would you say your single biggest takeaway was from Slush?
Yeah. Say maybe the single biggest takeaway came from this event around, it's called Exit 101. It was with Maria Raga, former CEO of Depop, which sold to Etsy for $1.6 billion a couple years ago. And then the general partner from Creandum, which was the VC on her board, Frederick Castle. And Maria was kind of talking about that journey as a founder or as a CEO of wanting to exit the company, wanting to sell, and kind of how to navigate kind of along the way. And I work with founders at the earliest stages. And so it was interesting to see someone much later talk about how do they create optionality to maximize kind of the value of that sort of acquisition.
So beginning with the end in mind is what I just heard. That's awesome.
Yeah, I think, yes and no. It was like beginning with the end in mind. But she also said, don't focus so much on the exit. You have to be okay with it happening and not happening, because otherwise your eyes are going to get really blurred kind of as a founder.
Yeah, clarifying what I said by beginning with the end in mind, understanding what your aspirational goal is, but don't focus on it exclusively to the point that you're not building the type of incredible company that will allow for that.
Yeah, you're completely right.
So what other incredible experiences did you have at Slush?
Oh my gosh. Besides, on the final night, there was this Windows Man DJ where they had a Microsoft Clippy kind of dancing on stage and electronic music. That was a whole nother experience.
AI's grandfather?
Yeah. AI's grandfather. Maybe Clippy was the original AI. I would say another really interesting experience was I got to go to the first day, the investor day. And, a lot of VCs are struggling to raise money for their funds right now because we had all the heights with fundraising back in 2021, and things have fallen quite a bit now. They've stabilized a little bit, and so it's really interesting and also hard to hear these VCs talking about, they're having to fundraise from limited partners and get pension funds, et cetera, to fund their VCs. And they were talking about how to have a successful VC nowadays, you really need to be raising kind of a $100 million fund or larger.
Yeah, I'd heard, gosh, this is relatively dated news, about a year ago or so, talking to a VC that you always have to be raising at some level. That yes, you're out looking for startups to invest in, but you're also always looking for other LPs for the next round.
Yeah, because that fund, you only have like a 5-year window where you're really supposed to make kind of primary investments and maybe some follow-ons. And so when you're getting towards the end of that initial 5 years, you don't have dry powder to spend on startups. And so you better be raising kind of that new fund 2 to 3 years into the previous fund you have.
Wow. That's an incredible takeaway from the VC side of the fence. You mentioned there were a lot of European startups there, but was there a lot of content for them and how they can better prepare?
Oh my God, so much content from like sessions on kind of how to fundraise. There was someone who built a startup. I forget exactly what it was, but it was around like building safety and construction safety. And she gave a great talk on how to raise a Series A and how to kind of build up that kind of momentum among investors. There was also like a talk from the head of startups of Anthropic. I believe it was Jamie Newworth. And he talked about kind of how startups can better use AI as they're starting to build, and some of the most common mistakes he was seeing. So there's so much programming for startups.
That's awesome. Now, you have kind of a unique view because you work in both the United States and in Europe. Is there a significant difference in the culture between the two places as far as startups and VCs are concerned?
Yes and no. When you talk about the cream of the crop, right? The best startups, the best VCs, like there is so much ambition in both Europe and the US. But then once you start to dig kind of underneath that layer, there is less capital in Europe, but it's been increasing pretty rapidly. And so you've started to see US investors open up kind of London offices elsewhere in Europe. You saw General Catalyst make an acquisition of La Familia, which is a European VC. So you are starting to see a lot more kind of energy, but I think there's also ways to go to kind of decrease that gap between kind of the European and US funding environments.
That's exciting. So if you were to imagine who should be at Slush, if you had a group of friends, VCs, other types of investors, startups, early stage businesses, who profits the most from going to Slush?
Yeah, I would say the investors probably profit the most. I think they were the most excited about wanting to go to Slush because they get to both talk with potential funders for their VCs and also potential startups. I would say if you're a startup, it's also really good to go to build connections. I would say one challenging thing is a lot of startups go to get funding right there, and it's hard to get funding in just a few day period. But sometimes
Shark Tank?
It's not Shark Tank, but they do have like a pitch event where the winner gets like €1 million, and that's really cool. But you often make connections that play a big role in a future funding round. So I would say, to answer your question, both startups and VCs, I highly recommend you go.
That's awesome. So we talked about your biggest takeaway. We talked about differences. Let me ask you a different question. What was your biggest surprise? Was there anything that you went there and didn't expect to see or expected that would be wildly different than your expectation?
Yeah, other than the Windows Man DJ with Clippy.
I think of lots of things when I think of Clippy. Music is not one.
Yeah, not one of them. Apparently he was at Eurovision as well. I would say one of the biggest surprises was the way AI was talked about. I imagine if you went to this conference a year ago, or maybe even a couple of years ago, right after ChatGPT got launched, all the sessions would be on AI, and it would be like, how's AI affecting this? How's AI affecting that? And I would say it was a lot more integrated into the sessions now. The session would be about something else, and AI would come up, and it was like, of course we're using it, right? Or you saw startups present that they were a travel tech company, but using AI. And so it felt like AI was starting to make more of a natural progression into the sessions.
Yeah, I've talked about this in other places, so I'll keep it brief here. But this is my third biggest revolution. I remember when email was the killer app, then of course the big change to mobile, and now this. And it seems like AI is now reaching past the hype cycle. We're starting to hit that peak where everybody's talking about it, but nobody has anything truly useful or truly consumer ready. It seems like some of the apps are things I would actually regularly use. I've got a good friend that's an AI researcher, and her recommendation to small businesses to treat AI like a gifted intern. You're willing to invest energy in it. You see all the potential in the world, but it gets no autonomy and no authority.
Do you feel like we're in an AI bubble, or do you feel like it's real?
Both, yes to both. I
Yeah,
absolutely think we're in a bubble. The business cycle is always the same hype cycle. We get to a place where things are real, massive consolidation where all of the businesses, unite under one banner, and then general
right.
use and acceptance. I still feel like we're in the hype cycle, but I think
Yeah,
we're at the end of it. So again, going all the way back to the late 90s, you saw all the companies that, regardless of what they did, they put tech or .com in their title
right.
because that's what everyone did. I sell goldfish at a local brick and mortar mom and pop, but I'm now goldfishtech.com because everybody else is. So we're still seeing a bunch of that, but we're reaching that point where some of these things are perilously close to prime time, ready to be used in a meaningful way where it's not putting out ridiculous mistakes and mirages.
Yeah.
So yeah, short story long, I think there will be a big consolidation, but I think AI, obviously, I'm not a Luddite, is here to stay.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's right. And there was a session where three really top VC investors were all asked on stage, do you think we're in an AI bubble? Because the valuations are still really high
Yes.
for some of these startups. And one said, no, we're not in an AI bubble. And then two said, yes, but sometimes the valuations are merited. And so it'd be really interesting to see how it kind of plays out.
There's nothing new under the sun. I suspect if we were to get into a TARDIS and go back in time, that the same conversations were being had around the Industrial Revolution and things of
Yeah,
that sort. So
absolutely.
it sounds like you had an amazing time hanging out with Clippy. So, and that you plan on going next year. It sounds
Yeah.
like you advise essentially anybody in the startup space that can go. Any other takeaways before we wrap this up?
Any other takeaways? No, I guess just maybe one other thing on AI that I found interesting from that same session where they asked about the bubble was we're starting to see more and more AI startups reach these levels of revenue that used to take startups 5 years to get to, and they're getting there in under a year.
That's amazing.
In 6 months, kind of reach 2 or 3 million ARR. And on the one hand, that's really amazing. But on the other hand, what some of the investors said was happening was there will be a lot of the same companies going after or a lot of similar companies going after the same space who are achieving this ARR. And so it's really hard as an investor to figure out, okay, through all this AI noise, kind of where do you invest? And so I that was one other takeaway I wanted to share kind of from the investor lens.
Yeah, differentiation is always difficult. I was speaking to a VC friend, and he'd said the excitement around AI is great, but at its core, a VC is looking for good deals, and there's not many of them left in AI.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you do find one, it could be a really, really great deal.
100% yes. So your rating on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 is epic beyond imagining. 1, you wouldn't roll over in bed to talk about it. Where does Slush fall?
I would say it was a 9. Probably be a 10 if I didn't have a cold throughout the week. It's a little bit down, but no, it was a really, really great event. Excited to go again next year, and I'll know even better kind of what events to go to, who I want to meet with, and really how to make the most out of the week.
That's amazing. And that's true, by the way, as a takeaway, for conferences in general. The first one is amazing, but it's almost always overwhelming.
Yeah.
After you've gone to the same conference a couple of times, you really start to be able to see where the value truly lies. And maybe it's not with Clippy the DJ.
Yeah. Who knows? Or maybe it's more time with Clippy the DJ. Guess next year we'll find out.
Fair play. Well, Jorian, my friend, thank you very much for being on. This was great. And thank you for sharing your experience at Slush with us.
Thanks so much, Jerry. Really a pleasure to get to talk to you about Slush.
Awesome. And one last thing, if people want to learn more about you and how you can help them prepare for early stage investment, where can they find you?
Yeah, so I'm a startup fundraising coach. They can find me at Jorian Hoover on LinkedIn. Also have a newsletter called Into the Ring. And just shoot me a DM if you ever want to chat.
That sounds great. Startup Nation, you heard it from Jorian. We'll see you at Slush next year.
Thanks, Jerry.